Hey guys, JustExo. I wanted to bring you a quick update about the Wolfgang rework and the video that I released yesterday, just to give you a more condensed version of what it was I was saying, specifically the problems and solutions that I propose. Starting off with the problem being the barrier to might entry being an issue for those who prefer the more rushing playstyle. The solution that I give is give him an alternative to becoming mighty, such as what I laid out was when he's at or above something like 75%, he passively gains might that way, which allows the people who want to perform a rushing playstyle to do so, while still making working out the most optimal way to do it. Overall, I don't think his change would be too intrusive for the people who like his rework, but I don't think it would also be a hindrance to those people who prefer the rushing playstyle, because then you have two alternatives, one of which is probably going to be more preferred for them. Another proposed thing is that when Wolfgang is at his hunger cap, any excess points that are given to him in hunger would then be translated over to his might at a reduced conversion rate. So let's say that he's at 90% of his max hunger, and he gets something that would fill up 20%. That extra 10% that would be left over can be translated into his mighty form. Wolfgang can access a soft mighty form regarding certain conditions to his hunger. So that makes it so that if they do something to change his hunger points and make those more contributed to mighty rather than just making working out the only way to do it, he could enter the form where he gets maybe double damage but not 1.25 speed, or not the 300 health. That's assuming that they change those, but you know, that's still up in the air. The next problem that I see people raise is the lack of team play. So people always complain that Wolfgang is a really solo-oriented character, and this update didn't do much to fix that. And the biggest solution that I see people throw out is allowing other characters to use the gym. Now, I, for the most part, agree with this, but I think it would be really interesting to allow certain characters to get certain different benefits. So let's say Wigfrid, Winona, Woody, characters that are more combat-oriented, can work on upper body strength in order to increase more damage. Whereas characters like Wickerbottom, Old Wanda, WX can get a speed upgrade instead, because of just inherently they're older, so they're a bit more frail, which is I think would lead to a more interesting way to play the characters and more interesting ways to use the gym. The next problem is that managing the might meter seems more as an inconvenience to a lot of players rather than anything, which I think adding that previously mentioned alternative to becoming mighty would really help to resolve this a bit, because then other players would end up just using working out as a means to get mighty in the instant, and it would also make them less likely to just get bored of working out itself, because a lot of people have issues with how it's done more than anything. Next problem is people think that Wolfgang is boring to play. Now, that's the point of the rework, to make him a bit more interesting and make him more refreshed. What I think people talk about whenever they say Wolfgang is boring is that he doesn't really have anything to set himself apart from other characters in the late game. When you compare him to a character such as Wanda, for example, Wanda has all of these cool tools and features that she could use in order to really capitalize on like the amount of things he has in the late game, whereas Wolfgang is just really oriented towards early game and just getting as strong as he possibly can in order to kill bosses whenever he can. So just adding something to him that would let him compete with other characters in the late game would be a pretty welcoming change, I would say. Next problem is people complaining that working out is lame. Now, I think this means a few things. They can make it a bit more interesting, such as giving him different mini games that he could do, since a lot of people's complaints is that working out as the mini game gets stale over time. What I propose is that Clay should add different machines that he could work out at, some being like a hack squat machine for leg workouts, which would increase his speed. A bench press, which would help with upper body strength more than anything else. Overall, just adding a variety in minigames would help people not get bored of it as quickly, rather than just making it all a Dead by Daylight skill check. Next problem is the lack of use for Wimpy form, which I don't think is too big of an issue. Wimpy form isn't really something that was desirable, albeit sometimes what people would use Wimpy form for is to recover more health, because naturally, since Wolfgang's Wimpy form had less max health, he could get to max with less healing resources, such as just using like 2 or 3 pierogies as opposed to like 8. Next problem that I see people bring up is Wolfgang being too overpowered, which I'm not a person to ask about balancing Wolfgang. Personally, I don't think Wolfgang is all that great. I think he is hyper specialized in one field, that being he is really good at combat, but he doesn't really have anything to offset his late game deterioration, whereas other characters have things to combat that, such as the example that I keep bringing up is Wanda. But that's just because she has so many options in the late game and is compared to Wolfgang so frequently just due to her combat capabilities, that she ends up being the prime choice for the examples that I make. So just giving something to Wolfgang that helps him combat that end game utility that isn't really present when compared to other characters who kind of do it better than him, such as Wanda and to an extent Wigfrid. The next problem is mostly just my complaint, which is the gym serves no utility to any other characters other than the one who put it down, which this is speaking to a much more broad issue that I have with a lot of aspects of the game. So if we look at a character like Winona, she's a character who everybody can use her structures to the same exact degree that she can, which causes people to use her as a swap character, ultimately just making her the put structures down character and then swap over to a different one. I think that is pretty unhealthy because like it just makes Winona pretty bad. But on the flip side of that, you have Warley, who is a character who puts down his structures and he's the only one that can use them ever, which I think is really annoying in a team setting where you're not going to have Warley all the time just due to him either not being at the base or due to him disconnecting for whatever reason. Like, Warley's structures then become dead. Like, they serve no use to anybody unless you swap to Warley, which overall I don't think is a particularly great thing. So the example that I bring up to what they could change the character or the character items to be more like is Bernie, where you're not going to get the best benefits out of Bernie if you're not playing Willow. Because what Willow does is she turns Bernie into basically a mini boss that follows you around that you can use for varying degrees. But even if Willow isn't there, other characters can still use Bernie for a distraction, which is what his primary use is for those characters. So having something that offsets the utility for other characters, as well as allowing them to still use it, would be a really interesting way to balance a game, in my opinion. But yeah, that's basically all I wanted to cover. I just wanted to provide that quick summary of what it was that I was talking about in the previous video, which I would still recommend you go check out because I go a bit more in depth behind the thought process behind everything. But yeah, that's about it. See ya.